Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around various aspects of COVID-19, as well as everything that's going on with the US elections. Through these 242 days of the pandemic and the lockdown in New York, we have been live every single day. And we have been talking about various aspects, of course, the economic, financial, the health aspects, but we also talk about what we are learning as a community, as individuals through the pandemic. And today we have a very special guest for episode number 242. Fred Dust is with us. He's the former global managing director of the legendary design firm IDEO. And he's the author of a brand new book, Making Conversation, 7 Essential Elements of Meaningful Conversation. I really feel like I should have had him help me out before we started 242 episodes. So he's here 242 episodes too late to help me, but he will be here to help all of you. You'll meet him in just a moment. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, don't plan your virtual event without talking to us. We've done events for 50 people and events for 100,000 people. We bet your event is somewhere in between those two numbers, and we'd love to geek out and help you with that. My email address is right here. Get in touch and talk to us about it. If you haven't seen the show, in our first 230 episodes, we've had more than 1 million viewers, 156 million social impressions, 419 guests from 71 cities and 20 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. We're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. Please check them out. Our archives are at youtube.com/Sreenet. We're so grateful to our sponsors and to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. They're live tweeting and sharing, and I hope you will do the same. We're live right now on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Tag your friends. We're usually on 9 p.m. most weekdays and on Sundays, but on Saturday we try to do this early in the morning so that our producers can get the evening free. And we are meeting at the perfect time because this is a moment in the lull between the elections and the announcement of the new president. So we will hear about that, we believe, by noon Eastern time today. So this is the perfect moment. And I'm so grateful to have a chance to talk about a lot of different topics with Fred Dust. He's now joining us. We're very grateful to him. He is the former global managing director of IDEO and the author of Making Conversation, 7 Essential Elements of Meaningful Conversation. Please say hello to Fred. Hello, sir.
Hi, Sree. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. It's a little earlier for me, so sorry. Like unshowered, but here nonetheless.
You're here. First of all, the only way we know is because your hair is so glorious. Look at my hair. Look at that. So I remember worrying about showers before being on camera. I don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly. Good for you. Actually, I should just take my hair off, I think, at this point.
Enjoy it while you have it. Welcome. My first question always is, how are you? Where are you? And how's your family handling the pandemic?
We are good. We are on an unbridged island in Maine. That's a quite lovely community. However, I'll say that we just had our first outbreak. So we have now 7 cases on the island of 250 people. So it's a significant moment. There's enough anxiety and fear in America right now. We just added a little bit more into it, unfortunately.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and please stay safe. Though an unbridged island sounds really good right now.
It's the nice thing is that we can succeed if we need to. Like we can just basically pull out of the union. So we'll make that happen if we need to. So.
Well, I was telling somebody that we're going to Puerto Rico, and we're doing that partly to prepare for Thanksgiving and for the coming Civil War. We're joking about these things, but this is also a reflection of where we are as a country, so divided, Do you want to start a little bit with just talking about what you think of where we are at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, this might be a sort of a funny observation. I mean, so just because we had no COVID until like a couple weeks ago, or God, yesterday, 2 days ago, I was at my congressman's house for the elections, which I usually don't watch on TV for a lot of reasons. We are divided, and yet at the same time, I will say we are still a democracy that's working. It seems like to me, it's like we're still counting the votes. I suspect we have a military that would be against a coup. I think I don't know. I feel divided, but I also feel like maybe less than we think we are. I'm happy to talk about why that is. But I've spent a lot of time having conversations with people who are Trump voters, but are Trump voters for surprising reasons. So I don't want to assume divide necessarily.
Well, let's start with that. You can't tease us with that saying you have some thoughts on it. So let's hear that, and then we'll talk about other things.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I as you might know, I'm working right now with Rockefeller Foundation and a few other foundations. One organization working on the social fabric of America, and my feeling has been, if I can talk to a former president and say, "Hey, get on Facebook," or sorry, not get on Facebook, get on Zoom. I can actually go up to like a hunter who's hunting my property, who's a Trump voter, and I've been doing that. And like I went and talked to somebody who was bow hunting my property, talked to his son, had a long conversation, and he's definitely a Trump voter, but his reasons are different than just like, he believes Trump made the economy better. Great, like it's like that's fine, So I just don't want us to assume that just because we're seeing this divide, it's a race issue, or it's like there's a lot of other reasons why people vote the way they vote. Does that make sense? I'm curious.
I think it does. I think a lot of people were just surprised by the fact that elections are a referendum on a president's first term. You can't just go by the economic numbers, which, by the way, greatest economy ever. There were 40% of Americans couldn't afford a $400.
That's exactly right.
Expense, right? So that is not the greatest economy ever. But we saw that more people voted for Trump this election than voted for Barack Obama or anybody except Joe Biden in this election. That means, what does that tell you about the country and this idea of whether this was in fact a referendum or much more than that?
Yeah, I mean, although we're still seeing divides on electoral votes, popular votes. It's a very strange mix of things that we're seeing right now. I mean, all I'll say is that, so I have a county, like the county that I live in is, I think it's 68% Trump voting. And so I have my neighbor is a Trump voting guy. He's also an EMT who was deployed into New York during the height of the pandemic. And so all through the pandemic, he and I, or the first part of the pandemic, he and I were texting nonstop about what he was experiencing in New York. He was like telling us the terrible things he was seeing. And when he came back, he sat on our front lawn and cried. And he cried for about 2 hours. And my husband and I were like, well, what's up with that? Like, why did he come by to like have this kind of tearful conversation? And we realized he didn't feel comfortable going to his wife and child and talking about what he'd seen. And so what I would say is that just because people are politically divided doesn't mean we can't be reaching out and making conversation with them, which is obviously, that's the focus of the book. I'm not pro-Trump, but I'm not anti-Trumpers. I mean, I think we can still have conversations with them. I think it's our job to have conversations with them.
Very well put. Let's talk a little bit about the book. We were having also people watching from around the world. So everyone tell us where you're watching from, and please make sure you ask Fred questions. The book's website, by the way, is called Making Conversation: 7 Essential Elements of Meaningful Communication. I was saying, Fred, that I feel like you're 240 episodes late to help me out here. So tell me, and so I'm a little nervous also having an expert on conversation in a conversation. So, well, how did you come up with the book idea? I know it's your work, life's work in part, connecting with people, talking to people, getting them to share. But tell us about the origin of the book.
It's funny. The origin, obviously, when you write a book, you realize the origin was like your childhood. That said, the origin really, it was my last project with the Obama administration. I did a lot of work with that administration, was with the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. And I don't know if you know Vivek or his work.
He's fantastic, terrific.
He's an amazing guy. And he was about to issue a epidemic of anxiety and fear and isolation in America. And his reasoning behind that was that, how do you get to the notion that everyone's addicted to opioids? Or how do you get to the notion that like everyone's, potentially dealing with gun violence in their lives? And he really felt it was about isolation and anxiety. So I was working a lot with him, trying to actually make town halls that could feel cathartic and engaging and build community and build connection. And we were doing that at the same time. He turns out to have written a book proposal at that point that got bought by HarperCollins. I too did a book proposal at the same time that got bought by HarperCollins. We had no idea that was happening. His was about isolation and loneliness, which is like his book Together, which I think it's Together, which he wrote last spring. It came out last spring. And mine is sort of, I kind of think of it like as a call and answer. Like he's like, we're alone, we're isolated. And mine is like, we can be together, we can have hard conversations. And so that's kind of where it started. Is I decided at that point to leave IDEO, find out like how people are making the hardest conversations happen using creativity, and really spent, it was almost 3 years in the writing to convince myself that we could do it, actually, if that makes sense. So that's the origin, at least in recent history, for me.
I hear you. We are looking at your Twitter handle where you are active. You said to us that you are not on Facebook, and I said your life must be much better.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It is and it isn't. I mean, I will say that we went off about 8 years ago on New Year's. We just basically decided we weren't going to do it. I still have an account, but I can't get onto it, which I'm fine. I keep it up because my brother died, and ironically, his life lives on Facebook, which is a very strange aspect of Facebook. But right now, living on an island, it would be nice to be on Facebook because that's the way everybody understands what's going on. And I have no idea what's going on our island because of it. So it's probably the one reason I should be on it. But
my condolences about your brother. And I know what you mean about people using Facebook as a primary means of communication, both good and bad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, I will say that like I'll arrive in town and the whole island knows way before I do because like it's all tracked on Facebook, which is like maybe a little too much actually, as far as I'm concerned. But
as we're looking at this, we see your locations given as New York, Bovina, and North Haven. Tell us how you, where you grew up and your kind of physical journey.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, it's Bovina. It's a.
Sorry, that tells you how out of touch I am.
No, it's a shibboleth. I mean, we actually, it's funny. We have a town near us called Delhi, which is actually should be pronounced Delhi, just so you know. So it gives you a sense of kind of, and
it's like Madras is another. There are those places. Yeah,
that's exactly. And we have Cairo, which we would consider Cairo, but it's like, but so yeah. I mean, originally I'm from Chicago, but we moved from Los Angeles, my husband and I, 10 years ago to New York. And that was mostly because most of my work was happening in Washington. A lot of work with the administration, with Elizabeth Warren. I had the good fortune to work with her when she was founding CFPB, doing a bunch of things there, plus working with large philanthropies, large organizations in New York, lots of nonprofits, Planned Parenthood. And at some point, it didn't make sense for me to be like living on the West Coast and flying back and forth, but I didn't want to move to Washington really. And so we moved to New York. And what was weird is I thought I was West Coast to the core, and it turns out I'm like super New York. Like I love New York. It was amazing. But here's the funny little secret. During Sandy, there was somebody who had I was on an elevator and somebody started coughing. And while they were coughing, I was like, we don't make it in a pandemic. So we bought a farm 3.5 hours outside of New York in Bovina, because we felt like that would be a safer place. So we've been there pretty much since March 1. We've been locked down knowing that this was going to happen. I mean, Sree, it's interesting, especially knowing that you've come, I think you were at Columbia for a while, like in the journalism school. It's like, it's like we would have seen the pandemic coming if the press hadn't pushed everything down below the fold because everything was Trump based, right? Like, so we were like, we couldn't get to the stuff that was like indicators that something bad was going to happen because we were so deluged with the press that was about Trump. And so it was it's a signal to the moment, I think, in a lot of ways. So
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When they closed the pandemic office, that should have been a huge story, but there were 1,000 huge stories.
That's right.
So distracted. And by the way, great lesson for dictators everywhere. Don't get caught up in one scandal, get caught up in 1,000, and then no one will pay attention to that.
That's right. I mean, the way me and my team feels about it is like it's a climate change and the climate change, dictatorship, wet markets. It's a recipe, right? We knew this was going to happen. So it's surprising we didn't get it before. So
yeah. So folks, everyone, please follow Fred on Twitter. He's F_Dust on Twitter, and the website is makingconversation.com, and it's about 7 meaningful ways to have meaningful conversation. We won't ask him for all 7, of course, but we'll let him pick 1 or 2 that he wants to tell us about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one that I think is actually quite useful right now. So I'm going to go to the last chapter, which is actually when I usually talk about creativity, I usually start with the last chapter first anyway. So, which is the last chapter is create, right? And the primary point of that is that meaningful conversations should have a result. We'd like to have something that comes out of it that feels like real and powerful and tangible. And so that's really what the chapter is about. But there's a simpler lesson that I think is valuable for us right now, which is that in the situation where you can't talk or you can't talk to somebody, whether it's because they're a Biden or Trump voting relative, or whether it's because their religious persuasion is different from yours, or their gender, or whatever it is that you feel like is dividing you, I suggest that you just create, that you make together. And so I'll give you an example where I have one young woman who, when I gave a lecture, who basically, she's now learning golf from her father. She's like, I don't want to learn how to, I don't care about golf. I don't want to learn how to play golf. But it's a way for me to communicate with my father, even though he has a political focus that's different than mine. And so one thing I would say, especially now, as we're going into like Thanksgiving and other kinds of holidays, that we really consider, like, if you can't talk to somebody, do something else alongside them, knit, sew, read a book, play golf, cook dinner. But it's like, you don't have to talk in order to commune with somebody. So that's maybe one point that I would cut across that I think feels especially pertinent right now. Actually, I just wrote a piece. It's in Thrive Global. So if it's Ariana's site. So if you want to check it out, but last night I wrote a piece that was about why we should be counting stars while we're counting votes. So, and the point of it was that it's like in an ambiguous time while you're kind of like sitting and waiting. Maybe like counting stars puts things. Oh, there you go. You guys are really good at this. It puts you into a space where you understand that you're smaller than the world, that everything is bigger than you, and this is just one moment. And this is in conversation with a psychoanalyst who's also had cancer for 4 years. So she's living with ambiguity constantly. And so she and I went and had a conversation, and we watched the stars. And it was, believe it or not, it was unbelievably calming. We had the best conversation, one of the best conversations I've had for the last couple of weeks, just like sitting under the stars and not talking about voting, but instead talking about the stars.
Wonderful. Folks, you can just find it on Thrive Global. Just Google Fred's name. This just came out, so you can see it. While the world counts votes, consider counting stars. Of course, it's not fair. Those of us in big cities don't get to see as many stars as you do in Maine.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. A friend of mine wrote from LA, and he's like, "I'm seeing the wrong kind of stars," and I'm like, "Yep." And unfortunately, there's an end to how many stars you can see. So everyone has different stargazing capacities. So
Right, and in part, and because of the all the problems out in California, I don't even know how much they can see if they even tried to look up how much they could see. And that's one of the many topics we've covered here. Your book doesn't come out till December, but it's the #1 new release in running meetings and presentations. There's so much interest in how to have better meetings, how to have better conversations. Talk a little bit about that and about the Zoom world. And most of us are going from one Zoom meeting to the other. The other day, I had a client pitch where they asked to meet on the phone. And I was like, oh my God, we used to get work done without video conferencing. This is so cool.
Well, so actually, first of all, I think that's so funny on the Amazon thing, because it was a while ago #1 on etiquette and manners. So it's like I can't quite figure out the algorithms of how that all works, but I think it's really funny. Yeah, I mean, I had the good fortune, well, not the good fortune, but you know, working with Rockefeller, we were about to, I was going to help them work on their strategy for all convenings and global gatherings. We closed Bellagio, which is where the Rockefeller Convening Center, on basically like in February. March 1, I wrote a short chapter because my editor told me I had to, on how to run meetings during a pandemic. I've been living by those principles since March 1, and it's really worked. And one thing you just hit on that, which is like, we don't have to do it by Zoom. Like, phone calls are much better for some things, right? So in fact, when I was doing the book, I interviewed a guy, you might know him, Rajun Arsetti, who was he does McKinsey quarterly, but and he was at Columbia for a while, but I think it was he was really concerned.
I should just say he's a dear friend, and I've known him for 25 years. He's a terrific guy.
He's a love. I love Raju. It's like and just like such a genius. Like I just whatever. But we were talking about phone, and like the fact that like phone calls are where, with my husband, that's how I fell in love with my husband, was long conversations by phone. And I think it was he or somebody, someone I know who was like reflecting on, would we be able to fall in love without, like, would his son be able to fall in love without having a phone call? And so what's interesting about that is that I feel like phone calls are ways to be way more intimate. Like you have different kinds of conversations on phone calls. So one of the things I write about is choose your medium. You know, it can be Zoom, it can be a Google Doc. Like Google Docs can feel like a conversation. Like with my editor, when he and I are working in a Google Doc, and at some point he'll be like, there's something wrong with your brain. It's like, it's as though I'm sitting and talking with him. Like it's kind of remarkable. And so one of the things I really look at is all the different methodologies at our disposal. It doesn't have to be Zoom. Like I'm fine with Zoom. And in many ways, I've been finding our meetings are more inclusive, more open, more engaged, more loving because of the medium. But don't think it's the only medium. So yeah, maybe you read it during the March 1. I basically wrote this kind of 4 principles for how to have conversations during a pandemic, and it's been really helpful for me and my teams. My teams are working better than ever, actually, to be honest.
So that's one of the things that I've also been thinking about. One of my friends, Mira, used the term toxic productivity that's coming from this nonstop work. Talk about that a little bit, please.
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's funny. One of the first chapter of the book, which is commit, is basically the idea behind it is, if you're going to go into a conversation, commit to that conversation and commit to the people in that conversation, right? So it's like, and that's the idea that we hold our values a little in the back pocket, but we like commit to being in the conversation with people. And so one of the things that is ironic, and then one of the things I say in the book is commit or don't. Like if you're feeling unsafe, or you're feeling like you're not kind of critical to the conversation, or you're not really helping. Often, I don't know, Sree, if you've seen this. I mean, you work with so many organizations, but there'll be somebody on a board, you know, who's just like, they're always disagreeing with it. And they're like, well, I don't believe the organization can survive, but it's really important that I'm there so I can just like always critique. And I'm sort of like, yeah, maybe not. Maybe you should get off the board. It's like we need people who are committed. So one of the things that I wrote when we moved into the pandemic is I basically was like, commit or don't. And the reason I wrote that is that it's like, this is a great moment to purge all the things you feel like you're not committed to. You'll make those conversations better conversations because you won't be the kind of the voice that doesn't care. You'll make your life better because you'll give time over to, your spouse or child or dog or just yourself or nature. But you'll also, you'll just, you free yourself up. You'll kind of break out of this toxic, like what was the term you used? Toxic
productivity.
And so it's been quite helpful for me. Like I've been like, yeah, I can't do this. And like actually, interestingly, Sree, like I'll get onto a call like this because I've been doing podcasts and lectures and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey guys, you don't want to show up? Don't show up. It's fine. Or if you want to show up and just cry, like it's cool. It's like, so yeah, I just feel like it ended up being a really useful thing for kind of just purging stuff out of my life and a lot of my teammates' life as well. So, and last thing I'll say, Sree, is that those who are committed, we've bonded so well. I'm sure you're feeling the same way. Like it's like if we're there together, we've really connected in a deep way. So, one of our mutual friends, Nico, we talk every 2 weeks, and it's like we're like diligent about doing that, which was not the way it was before this pandemic, so it's really interesting.
Can you talk for a quick second about the importance of food in making conversation? Because that's one of the things that's missing now, right? You're able to talk to Nico, but I know that he, he's great taste in food and getting together and having a drink. That's missing from most of what we're doing, even if we have a prearranged Zoom over wine kind of thing. Talk about that and why is it important? Why are people longing to be back in a room and dining together?
Yeah, last time I saw Nico, he took me to a gem of a Japanese restaurant where we had like just incredible sushi, like as Nico would, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's missing. I mean, it's I don't know about. I mean, so I live with my husband. We cook together every night. It's actually, I mean, we love cooking, so it's like this really remarkable thing. So for us, it really matters. I will also say that there's some dumb things that are related to food that you might not think about, which is that every night my husband and I make the table together. Like we set the table together. So we like lay a tablecloth, we put plates down, we put the wine glasses down. And that's in essence setting the stage for the fact that we're transitioning from our work life to our home life and really connecting around that. So you can still eat and have that kind of food experience in those situations. Also, remember, I'm on an island where until recently we had no cases, and so what was interesting is that we were eating together outside. It was like there were restaurants that were open and felt relatively real, and you could still kind of enjoy the notion of food. I remember the first time I went to a restaurant and being like, wow, it's like I can order a martini again. It was like this amazing, because it's like I can't make a cocktail for the life of me, but just that notion that we could do it. So the other thing I will say is that, eat together, like for, on Thanksgiving, like it's like do it online if you can. Or we have a guest coming to our farm. We're all being tested. She and her daughter are going to stay. They're going to stay in a house next door to us. But we feel like it's so important that we at least eat with one other person aside from us. So we're just doing everything we can to, with all precautions, do that. We feel like we need that in our lives.
Sure. Folks, we are talking to Fred Dust, the author of the brand new, I don't know if you can call it brand new when it's not even out yet. So it's soon to be brand new.
I can't believe it's so funny. Only because of you do I know that it's even on Amazon trending on anything. So so thank you. That's a nice gift for a Saturday morning.
Yeah. So making conversation, 7 essential elements of meaningful communication. And Fred is doing incredible work with all kinds of big organizations, the Rockefeller Foundation. He's worked with IDEO, which we want to talk about a little bit. He's also helping people rebuild human connection in a climate of widespread polarization, cynicism, and disruption. And he's also on the faculty of the Esalen Institute, which he'll tell us more about as well. Before we do that, I want to just get some of the comments in. Folks are watching from around the world. Thank you all for joining us and for sharing your comments and giving us a sense of how your Saturday is going. Jonathan's watching from the East Village. And one of the things I'd love, Fred, is for you to reflect on any of these places that we have people watching from, either a favorite place, a meal, what you like or don't like about a particular place. Jonathan, by the way, has watched 242 episodes in a row, which is an amazing feat, and has been a guest on our show as well. So East Village, to you, please.
So East Village, Jonathan, I think, is it Freeman's? That's the restaurant near there, but also there's also, I think Prune might have closed, but they're like some of my favorite restaurants were over in the East Village. I love the East Village. And I'll also, like, one of my dearest friends, the woman who runs IDEO.org, Jocelyn Wyatt, lives in the East Village. And I really was like, when she moved to New York, I was like, you need to buy in New York, and and so she has this little apartment in the East Village. I'm not sure she thinks that advice was the best advice now, but she's okay. She's like, she still goes back and forth. So Jonathan, welcome from the East Village.
And Brian's watching from Florida.
Florida, where I was born. Brian, I'm curious, where in Florida? Like, I was born in Indiana, but we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and I lived my first 5 years in Florida. Like, my parents wanted to be, I think they originally wanted to go work at Disney World. But it's like, I don't think they were able to get the job because they were too much of a hippie, too hippie. But it's like, and I just did a podcast with an amazing guy from Jacksonville the other day, and was reminded of just like how lovely Floridians can be. Yeah, just enough of a Southern accent. It was kind of cool.
And Florida has, the election results show that Florida is not really a battleground. It seems to, at least on appearance, have gone really fully Trump.
That's right, and it's like, and that's okay, Florida. it's like you do you. I mean, that's not. I mean, I can't say enough, Sree. It's like for all the reasons that I don't love this president, I feel like I don't want to make assumptions around why people vote the ways they do, and I think the most important thing is that we're voting. You know, I think it's how a democracy works, and so I feel like that really, I don't know, it matters. And obviously, like, the places I'm talking about, Northern Florida, Jacksonville, voted in a different way than the rest of the state. So it's just interesting. There's a lot of nuance to our locations.
We have viewers from India. Have you been?
Oh, so my greatest disappointment is that I wanted to bring my husband to India. Like, I love India. I spent I gave a little digression. I gave a lecture to 4,000 people on design in Mumbai. Like, this was like my first time in India, which meant that suddenly I had 4,000 or more, like 10,000 friends all around India. So as I was traveling around India, every place I go, every train station I would arrive at, every bus station, every time I would pull up in a car, somebody would be there waiting for me, wanting to show me a part of their town, like their hospital for, for kids with autism or whatever. And it was a joy. I loved it so much. And then on the other side of it, I did I spent like a week in Bihar, like during crazy storms, like in traffic, where we would be driving 14 hours to get to a village, do interviews. And it's the only place I've ever fallen asleep standing up. And last time I was there, I went to Dharamshala. So I started in Delhi and went up to meet with the Dalai Lama, which is kind of amazing. And India is something amazing. It's yeah. So yay, India. When I saw that you were broadcasting in India, I was like, oh, I'm so here. Like, I'm like so here for this.
Well, here's what Gags Dhaliwal is saying. On Amazon India, only the Kindle edition of the book is available. Please make the paperback available so we can order the book.
We
So
just sold the rights to the paperback that will be in every bus station, every it's like I was like, come on guys, I need the paperback version that's going to be in the bus stations. Like it's like, so I promise you, you'll be able to buy it live. I promise you. We just got that deal signed.
excellent. Mariel's watching from Kansas City and says, cool stuff. Any Kansas City memories or comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I gave weirdly, I was in Kansas City when I think Trump was nominated as the Republican candidate. So I remember having a long talk in an Uber driver about Kansas City. This is really fun. Like I'm really curious. But by the way, that's a great example of making conversation, which is that, talk to your Uber drivers, talk to your taxi drivers. The best writing advice I ever got in my entire life was from an Uber driver in Los Angeles, who basically was like, hey, she was about writer's block. And she was like, there is no writer's block, just write where you are, like wherever you are. And it turns out that was actually kind of stolen from Shonda Rhimes, but I got it from my Uber driver, who was like a young Black 20-year-old woman who wanted to like break into the writing room. So the lesson there is talking to my Kansas City driver was fascinating. I learned a lot about what it was like. So
excellent. And folks, please follow Fred. He's on Twitter. He's at F_dust on Twitter. Please do check him out. We'll keep going with the comments as they're coming in. Rishabh says, really enjoying your session. And Linda says, regarding eating, I just brought out my grandmother's pair of silver candelabra and lighting beeswax candles for dinner every night.
Isn't that so? That's so interesting, Linda, because what you're doing is, I mean, it's not just that you're actually making the table and setting the place of conversation, but you're actually bringing your grandmother into it, and it's like, and that means something. I myself was sort of raised by my great grandmother, who was a steel worker. By night she was a steel worker. By the day she was a farmer, and she's been very close to me in my heart for like the last kind of like 9 months. In part, if you don't mind, I'll tell you one really interesting little story. That my grandmother was an amazing storyteller, but she was really good at telling short 20-second stories. So my favorite story, I'll tell you my favorite story of my grandmother. She's coming home from the steel mills. It's the morning. She's walking up to the farm, and gradually she sees something blue hovering in the air. And she's exhausted. She's in this place where she's like, I cannot make it like one more day. Like I'm gonna have to like lay down the weary load. And she, this blue thing kind of floats in front of her, and it turns out to be Jesus Christ, and he winks at her. And that's enough for her to go on. And so that to me is like an example of like just the perfect story. It's like 30 seconds. It has a really surprising twist. You learn a lot about my grandmother. You realize that she was a religious woman. That's what got her through. And it's like, it kind of ends where the story begins. Like, it's like, there's a lot more, but we don't hear it. We just hear that like Jesus Christ winked at her. It's like, and that was it. So the point there being is that I learned from my grandmother, I think, like how to tell an amazing 20-second story, which I think everybody should do. I think it's a really real valuable, especially now that we're on Zoom.
And you certainly did. So thank you for that. The art of telling super short stories. But by the way, being raised by your great grandmother, that's a rare opportunity for almost most people, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like my, and she wasn't even really, she was like my half great grandmother. It's like, but she was a remarkable woman. I think I had parents who were a little disinterested in having a child, which is cool. But so my great grandmother was really, she was there for me. And I like, honestly, she was an amazing, amazing influence. I remember like running around and her stepping on a nail once because we were running on barefoot, and she just like weathered through it. She was a powerful, amazing woman. And grandparents, as you know, they're powerful figures, and great grandparents even more so. I still think of her quite fondly. Oh, here's a funny thing, because in the book I talk about clarity, which is actually like the way words play out and what words might mean and what words we should avoid. And one of the things that my great grandmother used to do, as did my grandfather, her son, is they used to call me Hollywood when I was a kid. And I was like, I have no idea why you're calling me Hollywood. I couldn't get a handle on it. And what I realized only recently is that for her, Hollywood signified gay. Like it was basically like all actors seemed like they were gay. It's like that's just like that was her generation. And so it was her way of acknowledging me as a gay man. And which I just is kind of amazing to me to think about the fact that like she was kind of subtly winking at the notion of my identity and making it okay in ways that my parents didn't, which was really powerful for me.
Wow, that's quite the story, and and again, the importance of anecdotes in kind of bringing together folks. I mean, you're teaching me how to have this conversation as you're doing it, including that these sometimes what some people think of as digressions or tangents are actually coming back into the story, into the conversation.
Well, Sree, I'm sure you're really like you're expert at this, but often what I'll do, like right now when I'm doing really hard conversations, let's say around D&I, or diversity inclusion, and you might have, let's say, a white, beautiful, tall, blonde woman CEO and a black, beautiful, woman CEO, and you're there in conversation with each other. What I realized is by asking them who they were at 12, you get really interesting insights, and you start to break down the barriers between these two people, because the white, beautiful, blonde CEO turns out to have been always tall, so she was made fun of nonstop while she was like in grade school, and the black, beautiful CEO discovered her hair and was like felt like she was the most powerful thing on earth because of her hair, at that point. And so it's by getting to these little mini stories that we start to empathize and understand each other as humans. And that's a really important thing. I mean, Sree, just out of curiosity, like, talk about 12-year-old you for a moment.
So 12-year-old me told my Indian parents in New York City that I was going to be a journalist, and they started crying immediately because Indian parents don't want a journalist. They want a doctor, engineer, etc. My dad and his brother and his brothers were all were born and raised in a house with mud walls and a thatched roof, and without electricity and indoor plumbing. And from that house, they raised a doctor and 2 ambassadors, and it's an incredible family. So when my grandfather used to think that my dad was a failure as a parent because he let his son become a journalist instead of somebody who was worthy of the progression that they expected, right? They thought from where they were to where my father was, I was going backwards, and it's hard to argue that they were wrong. But I did. But talking was part of this, because I remember saying to my grandfather that I'd rather be the person who is, talking to these interesting people. That's what I always loved doing. And he said, but why do you want to be the person begging people to talk to you? Why not be the guy who gets to say, okay, I'll talk to you. I won't talk to you. I'll talk to you. So that was kind of fun. The last point on this is people would say to him, what became of your good for nothing grandson of yours? And he'd say, he's a professor at Columbia. And then they said, what does he teach? Journalism. And so that was how he rolled. But we were very good friends, and it's so important to have kind of the wisdom of older generations in your life, and that's so important.
I really agree with that. But there's something else you said that I really agree with as well, which is that it's like, I believe our job on earth is to talk to other people. Like, I mean, that's literally like, that is the work that we've been put on earth to do. And by the way, I don't say that from like a religion. I'm not religious, but it's like, I just feel like the way we understand and embrace the world is by embracing and learning about other people. And so. And I'm sorry, I know I digress into little personal things. Maybe it's Saturday morning, so I'm feeling like it's more therapeutic or something. But it's my mother had a stroke when I was 24, and she was an amazing listener. And at that point, listening became a really hard thing for her to do. And I think seeing that and knowing that, in fact, I had a time limit on my life, that I was not going to live forever, meant that I was like, I need to embrace everything. So one of the reasons I've traveled everywhere is like, so I could actually see, but it's like, but one of the ways that I've actually like, but the real point is like meeting everyone I can possibly meet and talking to everyone. Like going back to India, like the person who was traveling with me the first time was like, can we just stop? Do we have to meet every single person in town? And I'm like, why would we stop? Like, it's like we should just like, you know, my favorite thing about India is like, you know, in America, we'll talk with each other, or US, and like we'll be across a room. Like that does not happen in India. Like you can be like the only other person in the room in India, and the person is right next to you, like they're right in front of you. And I love that. Like I remember like coming back to California and being like, I feel kind of lonely, even though like there's a lot of people around me. Like there's no one like right next to me. You know, so I just feel like the ways that people communicate and it's just a joy to be able to experience that. We're really lucky.
Well, there is the concept of personal space is not big in India. That's for sure. I think people.
I'm all for it. I love it. It's
All right, we're going to give you a chance to drink your water, and we just want to tell everybody what's happening this weekend. We have lots going on at our company at Digimentors. Right after this, our colleague Stefan Kaplan is hosting the Spin It Social Hour with Marge Kleinman as his guest. These are photographers sharing their work and journeys. She's from Stoop Stories. And then every Saturday from noon to 2, I host my weekly show, a call-in radio show about coping with COVID-19. And today we have an expert on learning and instruction. Professor Samuel Abramovich will be joining us from the University of Buffalo. And then Josh Pasek will be with us, a professor at the University of Michigan, talking all about the elections. And then tomorrow morning, we're continuing to celebrate the 5th anniversary of my reading the New York Times print edition out loud every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. We have a political strategist and consultant who's worked with hundreds of clients who have been members of Congress and big corporations and unions. So he'll be with us. 5 years of reading the New York Times out loud every Sunday morning. And then we will have our one of my favorite shows that I get to work with is She's on Call. 2 surgeons, Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian, talking about COVID and so much more. Tomorrow they have 2 psychiatrists on. This is at 11 a.m. Eastern. Please check out She's on Call on all your favorite social media channels. And then at 9 p.m. Eastern, we'll be doing my Sunday positivity version of this show. And just for folks who haven't heard, we're going to be transitioning after 250 episodes. That means 2 Sundays from now, we're going to do a big 250th episode, and then we're going to transition to 2 or 3 times a week instead of 7 days a week, partly because we are exhausted and we want to just try something different. So we're so grateful to everyone who's watching live or later. Please tag your friends. This conversation with Fred Dust has been so memorable already. We have just a few minutes left with him. We're going to ask him about more tips on being better communicators, both online and offline. And I'm going to ask him what he's looking forward to doing first when we come out of this pandemic. So please welcome back with us Fred Dust, who's the author of this new book. It's so new that it isn't even out properly yet on December 1st. The book is called Making Conversation, and everybody should check it out. 7 Essential Elements of Meaningful Communication by Fred Dust. So Fred, you just want to start with this book jacket. You obviously had access to the best designers and the most creative people in the world. How did you pick what you were going to use on the cover?
Well, it's actually really funny. So I had a friend who, and we had a deal for a long time that he would do the cover of the book, and I wanted, I'll be really honest, I wanted it to feel like kind of like a 1970s self-help book. Like, you remember like what color was your parachute, or like those kinds of things. So we went for something that felt like it had a little bit of like a retro vibe. I originally had one that was white, pink, and orange, which I loved. Like, I still, when we reissue the book, we are going to do the white, pink, and orange version. But my publishers and my publicists were like, blue and green? Nobody does blue and green. So we ended up with the blue and green version. But the white, pink, and orange one was like ultra 70s. So that's the story behind it. But it's like it was so fun working on it. I mean, to be honest, I had the cover done way earlier, because as a designer, I felt like I had to see something that felt like it was real in order to make sure that I felt that the book was actually real.
That is certainly one way to do it. So let's just check out some more of the comments and questions coming in. Mariel says that personal space is not enforced, LOL. Mariel also says that 5 years of the Sunday New York Times read along, it feels like an institution. And Alan says, I bet you're exhausted. And Mariel says, yes, what color is your parachute? Richard, is that Bowles? Is that how you pronounce the name?
I don't know, but it's like, but yeah, I'll never forget it. I don't think I ever read it, but my parents had it on their table, so it's like I remember seeing it. But it was amazing cover.
And Mariel says, thank you for your contribution, authentic conversation, making time for us. So thank you so much for doing that. We have lots more comments coming in. Linda is watching and says, good morning from sunny and fall foliage peaking Long Island.
Nice.
And what is foliage like in Maine, in that part of Maine, at this time of the year?
So right now here, for some reason, it's about 65 degrees and there's still leaves on the trees, which is unusual because it was freezing cold, like just like a day or two before. So as soon as we're done, I'm going to go for a run and probably just go for a run in shorts and a t-shirt. It's like, it's that warm, but it's a bit unusual. We're headed back to our farm, which will be, I mean, our lives now are almost completely rural, which we like. And I think, by the way, to your post-pandemic thing, I think this notion of blurring urban and rural might save us, to be honest. Like, it's like, I think it's going to cause tensions in the near term, but once we start to recognize that we're no longer urban or non-urban or east or west, I think it's going to start to build a kind of country that understands itself better. That's my hope and my theory behind it. So that's one. Going back to your point about post-COVID, that's one thing that I think comes out of it. But remember, as I'm on the board of NPR, and Nancy Barnes, who's the head of the newsroom, said to us early on, she was like, this is the story of our lives. Like, there will be no other bigger story for those of us who live right now. And I think that's actually just escalated given the kind of context that we have. And so while we will see a post-COVID world, we will never forget this moment. It will change the way we live forever. And hopefully, Sree, it'll make us value contact and connection and conversation with people more than ever, given the fact that we've had to live with so much that's not. So not to get really overly serious about it, but I do think it's important.
No, and this is so serious. I keep telling my children that this is the equivalent of World War II, and what did people say, where they were, how they survived it, how they lived it, is so important. Let's just go quickly through some of the comments here. Seishu from Connecticut says, great topic. Time for us to start having conversations rather than constant conflict. I've had some spirited but civil conversations in the last few months. It can be done.
It can be. I agree. Yes.
And Rick says, how can we have meaningful and civil conversations about the differences between fake and true patriotism? Do you want to just talk a little bit about nationalism, America first, and all of that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's a rough one because, you know, I so a friend of mine is the former prime minister of Greece, George Papandreou, and like he and I have been talking a lot this week because I felt like it's been really important to talk to like an original Democrat, right? So it's like, so if you go back to the ancient Greece, like democracy is real, and you know, he reminded me, he's like, you may not feel this way, but America still is a great experiment. You know, it's like you're still, and so in the moments where I want to be like so down on us and be like, we are like so bad. And by the way, I'm down on us. Like, it's like I lived in Europe and as a teenager, like I remember going to Amnesty International meetings, and all of the Amnesty International meetings were against American prison systems, right? So it's like, so I was like, America, really, come on, get it together. But I will say that it's like, we're still evolving, and I think we still have the chance to evolve. And I mean, I know that feels Pollyanna or a little bit optimistic, like more optimistic than it should, but I think that's kind of my job a little bit, is to be a little bit more optimistic than we might want to be. So I don't know if that helps, but I'm not by any means saying we were the greatest. We've never been the greatest. It's like, let's be clear, like we never have. But it's like, but we're still pretty good. and the rest of the world is pretty good. You know, it's like an example. Like I was like, I would have loved to talk about the fact that France talked about politics in a really different way, but the reality is they're not doing so well today. You know, it's like I'm not loving the way they're talking about politics. So it's like it's all an experiment in a way.
You're associated with so many great institutions, including IDEO and you mentioned NPR, Sundance. What can you tell us about organizations that are going to do well, survive, thrive in this period of great change, even without the pandemic, but with the pandemic, of course, and others that are not going to be making it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like, I got to tell you, I am bullish on Sundance. Like Sundance, remember, Sundance is it's a film festival. It's also a film institute. So they actually help get new artist voices into the world by helping them produce their films. And one of the things that I think is amazing is that they were just like willing to be unbelievably agile in the beginning. And so like when pandemic happened, they were like, our mission has been to be globally diverse, to hit the global market, to have impact on the global market of artists. And they took everything online March 1, everything, our festival, everything. And that was a powerful thing. The ability to pivot, but pivot in a way that was mission aligned, was amazing. NPR, I think, is going to be fascinating because it's local, right? It's the local stuff that matters right now. So it's like it's global, but it's national, but it's also it's also local, and that really grapples. That's it. I will say, every institution right now should go back and look at their mission and make sure it still feels relevant, and not be afraid to change the mission if that's the case. And if they can actually do something and pivot on mission, then I think that makes sense. I will also say, you're going to not believe this, but you know, people are always like, strategy is about focus. I sometimes feel like with the organizations where it's like, they're like, we're going to do everything. You know, it's like, it sounds like you've been doing everything, Sree. Like, I know my dog's back there. She's a love, but it's like, like organizations that are willing to try things, let it fail, try something different, like those are doing pretty well right now. And that's one of the things I've loved about Sundance is they're like, yeah, this is going to work, or it's not working, but we'll go on. If they hadn't actually experimented with doing online film work earlier, then we wouldn't have been prepared to do what we did during the pandemic. So I think agility and also a little bit of like, let's try it all, actually has been helping a lot of the organizations I've been working with.
Sure, and I think that agility will make a difference for all of us as we try to get through this. So before we let you go and get on that run on a beautiful day up in Maine, Marielle says, life is short, Renaissance gal here, love trying everything, and says, brilliant conversation today, thanks so much. Leave us with some ways to get through this Zoom era. What are some things that we should be doing to make those meaningful conversations and connections?
Yeah, I mean, so recently I did a very significant meeting with it was with people from the UN Global Assembly, which, by the way, you know, are like not typically the most productive meetings in the world. But one of the things that we did is we did this democratized breakout, where basically you would be like in a meeting with a Nigerian entrepreneur and a prime minister, let's say, like this sort of surprise things. And what that did is it rebuilt the notion that you could meet all new people. And so weirdly, while we might live in this moment where we think we can't meet people, we actually have more fluidity. So don't be afraid to reach out. That's also one thing I would actually also say, like Adam Grant, who's sort of a friend of mine, when he chose the book as one of the 30 books of the fall, I texted him, I was like, I guess I didn't realize you were famous, because I reached out to Adam Grant when he wrote Give and Take, and he wrote back. And so I would just say, like, don't be afraid to reach out to your heroes. Don't be afraid to reach out to people who you think would never get back in touch with you, because who knows? Like, everybody wants, like, you know, connection. Everybody wants like a moment of humanness. So it's a great moment to be reaching out to people and seeing who gets back to you. I don't know.
Linda says, fabulous guest. Thank you. So many encouraging ideas. Looking for the new book. So everyone, please go to makingconversation.com. You can get a link to websites, big and small, where you can buy the book. And
yeah, subscribe, because we're building a WhatsApp curriculum. So there's going to be a little 30-second curriculum on how to do it every day. So
using WhatsApp, you said?
Yeah, I'm going to use WhatsApp because I want it to be truly global, or as global as possible. So.
Sure. One of the things that if you haven't done this already on your website, you should put one of these.
Oh.
So everyone, if you want to know when I'm live on our show, just hold up your phone or your QR code reader, and you'll be added not to a WhatsApp group, but in my case, just a gentle alert saying you are live on the air, that I'm on the air. So you can do that right now. And I would encourage you to put that on your book as well. And I can show you offline how to get that URL or a QR code just for a link, just for WhatsApp that you can use as well. So I encourage everybody.
And Sree, like as I said, like when Nico was like, I think you'll like them, I was like, yeah, anyone you say I'm gonna like it. Like I trust. So.
All right. So I want to leave on a positive note because someone's posted a sad question here. Democracy, RIP. Is it so?
Listen, we voted. We're counting the votes. Like we think we know how the votes are going. Like it's like democracy is not dead. it's like I mean, democracy might evolve. And by the way, I love the fact that you're reading the New York Times, in full on Sunday. But also remember the New York Times played a part in this, like the news hooks. Like the fact that every day we were rising and falling. So I mean, yes, we're gonna be fine. And you can fight for democracy. By the way, you can fight for the democracy if you're in Puerto Rico. It's fine. It's like you can fight for the democracy if you're like in Europe. It's fine. Like it's not dead yet.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, watching the wave of nationalism and right-wing authoritarians taking over in many countries, this is not a repudiation of Trumpism, because clearly 70 million people bought into it, but the fact that he's no longer going to be president is a warning to those authoritarians that either you need to be more authoritarian or that history does catch up, right? And that's why even the greatest empires have fallen, and the worst.
Right.
So we hope. On that optimistic note, thank you so much, Fred Dust, our guest and the author of the brand new book, Making Conversation. It drops on December 1st, but you can buy it right now at all the online bookstores, and go to makingconversation.com. Thanks very much. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.